I now have the great pleasure of welcoming our first speaker to the stage, Barbara Gessler, who works for the European Commission in the Directorate General Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. Now, Barbara is head of the unit Creative Europe, the only program that exclusively targets the culture and creative sector, and she's responsible for the implementation of the funding program. So Ms. Gessler is going to give us some insight into the current situation of EU funding for culture in and after the COVID-19 crisis, and she'll focus on the emergency measures in 2020, as well as the future of Creative Europe culture after 2020. So thank you for joining us, Barbara. Can we hear you? Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Did you hear my big sigh when Leah said how young she is and what this actually means for the rest of us? Yes, thanks very much for the organization to Leah and the team. Indeed, you know, we're very happy to be working with such a professional desk with the Culture Ministry in Germany, having such professional people sitting in Bonn, but with a radar much beyond the region, if I may say, even beyond Germany, because you also initiate projects with your colleagues from the desks in other countries. And as you know, Creative Europe goes beyond the EU, properly speaking. So that's my first sentence here is to thank Leah and all of you engaged in this evening's event. Guillermo from the cabinet of our commissioner has already set, I think, the scene for what the European Commission has done. He has specifically given me the mandate to talk more about Creative Europe, but I would also like to say a few introductory words, if you don't mind. I would like to stress, first of all, that if we look at culture and the creative sector, the Commission is, of course, very much aware of the importance of the sector for the continued development of a society, and also of its role for creative economy development. And we know that the individual creativity and talent together combine for economic wealth. So there's an economic aspect, but of course, more importantly, and I think I saw that also in the Slido that we saw earlier, culture is also very critical to shaping a shared sense of a European identity and our core values. So what we are looking at is obviously not only an economic sector, but very much so also one that encourages and strengthens social cohesion in Europe's society. And today, more than ever, I think that is what we need. I don't have to remind you of the figures, though, because but just maybe to say one word for all of those that don't always look at these figures. In 2019, the cultural and creative sectors accounted for as much as 4.2% of the European GDP, and that corresponds to 7.4 million jobs. So that's not negligible, and I would like to say, yes, we don't look at the economy only, but it's also something that we should not lose out of sight, in particular in these days when it comes to bringing the economy also back to the fore when it comes to recovery and all the negative impact a suffering economy can also have, for example, on public or private funding for the cultural sector. So there's a whole cycle there that I think we have to look into. Needless to say, of course, you're all aware also of the positive effect that the cultural and creative sector, the spillover effects has, for example, on the tourism sector or on consumer goods and services and new technologies. So their creativity are a driver, and the arts are a driver to help these sectors grow and exist. So It's interesting to say that before the COVID-19 crisis, the cultural and creative sectors were proving particularly resilient and really were outperforming the average survival rates of service enterprises, for example. But now the crisis, I think we could see very blankly and quickly that the cultural sectors were among those that were hit hardest. And we have to keep in mind, obviously, that 95% of the sector consists of small enterprises, independent artists, freelancers, all of those. I don't have to tell you this. I think you're probably in the audience, very highly vulnerable constituency and working, unfortunately, often under very precarious conditions. And the Commission has immediately seen and been made aware of the impact of the crisis, cancelled projects, performances, shut down venues, halted productions, and also therefore, of course, as a consequence, the direct impact on the revenues and income, and adding to the precarity of the situation of creative professionals even more. In May 2020, when we made first assessments, we saw that there was a drop in turnover of more than 50%, but I think that has probably, unfortunately, worsened ever since. So, complementing to what Guillermo said, I would like to stress a few more elements. First of all, I would like to stress that immediately the Commission has contacted and collaborated very closely between the institutions, with the other institutions. You said it before: the European Parliament, the member states, but also the stakeholders and other interested circles. And it was very, very important that we've been swiftly exchanging information regarding the impact, and also talking to each other about short, medium, or long-term solutions. And that was a very strong and active dialogue. And I would like to stress here as well that we've had very interesting and important feedback also from the desks, and in particular also from our professional networks that we support under the Creative Europe, but not only those that we support, but also the others. I think they've played an enormously important role in this crisis to feed back to the institutions the impact on the sector. And Guillermo already said it. We have set up two online platforms, one as an exchange between member states. That is important because in the beginning we saw that everybody was kind of reacting for their own region, their own country, and that is probably quite normal and natural. But we wanted to make sure that there was an exchange, so people could actually learn from each other and see where there's good practice and good examples. And we have also, as you know, and the Goethe Institute will come in later to talk about that as well. We have set up Creatives Unite, which is actually running very quickly, which is a platform for the sector where there's a lot of encouraging results also when it comes to exchange of possible solutions also for the recovery. Then Guillermo mentioned the Creative Europe program. That is, of course, the program that I'm responsible for, partly at least, in my Directorate General for the culture part. We have reacted fairly quickly. We tried to reduce, Leah, and to everyone, we've tried to reduce bureaucracy. It's not always easy. We tried to be as flexible as possible. We speeded up evaluations. We prolonged deadlines. And we did launch a call for the cross-border distribution of performing arts, taking into account in particular also the dimension of virtual mobility next to live encounters. We've also acted on the European cinema sector and other areas, and we hope that these short-term measures that were the ones possible in a hurry will actually have the good effect that we intended them to have. Guillermo also mentioned the extraordinary call under the Erasmus Plus program. This is a call in particular linking the educational training and youth sectors with the cultural sector and the grassroots organizations in that sector. We aim at having as much as 100 million euros under that call. The deadline for this is, please check it out, is on the 29th of October. And I think this has been quite an extraordinary initiative, which we should be really grasping, and which can be hopefully of added value, concrete added value for the culture and creative sector, even if it's not the Creative Europe program. Guillermo has been mentioning various initiatives that have been taken at the horizontal level, and I would like to stress that once more. In the beginning, the Commission obviously had to focus very much on horizontal measures before then going into more sector-specific support mechanisms. And one of those horizontal measures was certainly setting up a temporary framework for state aid, which already a lot of member states have asked to use, so support could be given to the cultural sector and the audiovisual sector in particular, for example. Then we have the so-called coronavirus response investment initiative that gives up to 37 billion euros, and for there, obviously, the culture and creative sector is also eligible. We have also set up an instrument to support the mitigation of unemployment risk in an emergency, the so-called SURE mechanism, which offers up to 100 billion euros in the form of loans to the member states in order to help short-time work schemes and similar measures. But of course, as you see, and as Guillermo already said, much of this is in the hands of the member states. And I'm also very happy that later on we will be hearing from my colleague in DG Regio what the member states can and should and are willing to do to help the cultural sectors. Importantly, Lea mentioned it, we have had, I think, to put it in an optimistic frame, we have had the impact of the crisis so visible on the culture sector. I think that the European Council and the heads of state and government actually saw how really important it is to dedicate money to the Creative Europe program, which is why we were really happy to see that the European Council has reinstated the proposal of a budget for our program, because in our calculation, this represents 33% increase compared to the current program. Guillermo said it, so that's why I dare saying it again. Of course, the more it gets, the better. And I'm very positive that later on, the head of the Cult Committee from the European Parliament, Mrs. Verheyen, will say something in that respect, because the Parliament has been a fervent defendant of a high budget for culture in general. Now, coming to Creative Europe in general. The Creative Europe program will continue focusing on the two objectives that are already its current objectives, and that are the ones that we have been given by the treaty. You know, we are talking in a framework of subsidiarity between the member states, the national level, and the European level. So the two objectives that we can actually add on at the European level are: one, safeguarding and promoting cultural diversity, and second, contributing to the competitiveness of the sector in an increasingly globalized world. This is the general frame for our intervention. And I would like to say that under the culture subprogram, our main support is and will continue being the support to European cooperation projects that will aim at strengthening the transnational creation and circulation of European works, and at the same time also help to enhance the capacity of the sector to nurture talent, to innovate, And innovate, I will be very clear already now, innovate not purely in a technological sense, also to help prosper the economy and to generate job and growth. And I think it's fair to say that this program very much sees the broader picture and the broader role that culture can play for society, and is not, as many may have thought maybe a little bit in the past, it is not focusing at all on the economic aspect of culture, or the economic positive impact that culture can have that I mentioned in the beginning. We don't set it aside, but equally important are the societal effects of culture and arts and artistic creation. The program will obviously remain to be open to public and private organizations that are active in the culture and creative sector. That includes obviously governmental organizations or territorial organizations or universities. And I would like to stress, I would like to also invite you to read more about that, but I would like to stress that since the beginning of the program, and the culture strand in particular, more than 82% of the culture funding under Creative Europe has gone to micro and small organizations, because we know that these represent the core fabric of Europe's culture and creative sector. And already today, the support to players in sectors such as music or literature really helps artists also from smaller countries reaching wider audiences outside their national borders. This is what we call the European added value that we always have to strive at having. Now, as regards timing, many of you are probably very curious about what Leah also hinted at. We are currently working very hard on finalizing with the co-legislators the new legal base, and then we will be ready to launch the new calls as quickly as possible. For the culture part, this means that we still aim at keeping the calendars as we had them, but obviously normally many of you around the table, the virtual table, will know that we normally had our calls in the summer with deadlines around the darker side of the year. This will now not be possible because the program is not ready, but as soon as it is adopted, we will be ready to launch calls, and then we eventually, over the years, we will be hopefully returning to the calendar as we had it before, because we know that this is also a calendar that has proven its validity. We are also looking very concretely into enhancing the accessibility of the program, for example, by raising co-funding rates, because we are aware that the co-funding, the own resources, matching funds that you need in order to be able to participate in a European project are very often a burden and a hindrance to successful applications, which is why this is something that we are concretely looking into, and which we hope will help organizations, no matter their size, to access our funding. We, of course, also want to continue making successful schemes even more accessible, and help them grow. For example, the network scheme and the platform scheme, and we will continue the iPortuno scheme that allows individual artists to circulate across Europe, that is already going on now. We have also had a specific call regarding the performing arts sector, and watch this space, because there will be a result of this call very soon, which should help in particular the very badly hit performing arts sector, also in the circulation of works. You know that Creative Europe, Guglielmo mentioned it, has added a new action, a complementary action to those horizontal actions that I mentioned earlier, in the form of sectorial support, such as a continuation of the Music Moves Europe initiative in the area of music. You know that we had a specific call for the music sector, for which the deadline was end of September. And we have also looked very concretely with the member states and the countries concerned into that was very important into helping the current capitals of culture that we also finance via the Melina Mercouri Prize under Creative Europe, help them extend their title into next year and give the possibility to postpone the following capitals to 22 and 23 respectively. So these were very concrete actions that we took, because obviously the capitals were in a very bad situation when everything came to a halt all of a sudden. Last but not least, and then I will stop, I would like to say, of course, funding is one thing, but we also have a mandate to support policy cooperation at the European level. And some of you may be aware of the way we do this. Is called the open method of coordination. It's not only done in culture, but also in other subsidiarity policy areas. It's a very light but structured way in which member states cooperate at the European level, where we have expert groups talking to each other on specific topics, and the Commission facilitates those. And we have had a couple of very interesting groups in that respect. For example, one on the social dimension and the social status of artists. We have one on multilingual aspects of culture in Europe, one on architecture as well, and then other priorities in the culture area that we are working on are, as you heard before, promoting gender equality, which is of course very dear to the Commission, to this Commission, working on sustainability, in particular also in cultural heritage, sustainable development, adaptation to climate change. This is very important for this Commission. But I would like to stress that we are indeed looking very closely into the social dimension of culture. So these cooperations are obviously ongoing, and we are helping that this exchange takes place, and it's very important to mention that these two things in the future will continue working hand in hand, supporting policy, cooperation, and funding. And I think that's also big news when it comes to the 21-27 program, that for the first time this will go really much more hand in hand than in the past, and it will help us look at the political problems and solve them also with European money. I leave it at that. I've been speaking, as always, too long, but I'm of course
that was fantastic.
Available for questions.
Absolutely. I think you answered a lot of the questions on the go. We could just let you keep talking and there wouldn't be any questions. We'll take a quick look at Slido and see if there's anything still outstanding, but you answered a lot of the questions that I had written down. So the top question that we have here is, what is the status quo of the negotiations for Creative Europe? I mean, you did touch on that things are happening.
Yes, indeed. So I can't. The status quo is that this is really a moving target. We hope to be. We hope to have. You know how it works. We work in technical meetings with the institutions. It's the co-legislators, obviously, are the European Parliament and the member states. They are the ones that decide on the law upon proposal of the Commission. And we hope by mid-end November that a compromise on the proposal will be found. But I hope I'm not leaning too far out of the window here. This is my real hope. And I think there's good signs that everybody around the table is really willing to do that from all sides, because this crisis has shown how important it is that we all get our act together, and I really hope it will work. I see a question on the UK. Well, that's a bit tricky, obviously, because the UK has actually officially said, but I could see that Katie is with us as well. So maybe Katie wants to add something. has specifically said that at the moment it's not interested in joining Creative Europe. So that, of course, I can say this in this closed room. We will not stop working with UK organizations, but not in the form of support via Creative Europe. And Katie just said that there's a link that you should all look into with more information on that particular point.
Yes, Katie's put that in the chat for us. There's one more question at the top here. Has it been decided what level of co-financing will be required for Creative Europe projects?
I cannot devolve it yet, but it will be, in particular, it will be considerably raised, in particular for smaller projects. You know that we have small projects with 3 partners, and we have larger projects currently with 5 partners. And that will definitely be raised. All of those co-funding rates will be raised. And I cannot tell you now exactly because we're not allowed to go public on this, because obviously the legal base is not stable yet. We don't know exactly what the budget will look like, but there will be a considerable increase, in particular for the small project.
Great. Okay, there's another question that's jumped up to the top here from Alexander Kruse, which says, when will the next calls be?
Well, as I said before, we are in the starting blocks. I'm ready to push the button, but we cannot do that until we have a stable legal base. This is how it is phrased at the European level. So as long as we don't know what the program will look like in a little bit more stable way, and that, of course, we're still in negotiations, so then there are still issues that the co-legislators have to agree upon. And once this agreement is there, we will be able to hopefully launch the calls very quickly. Listen, I'm hoping still this year, but if not, at the latest, and in the beginning of next year.
Okay, great. I think we've got time for another question. Let's do this one then. What links are there between the creative and cultural sectors and the EU's policies fighting climate and biodiversity crises? That's relating to the Green Deal or the biodiversity strategy, for example.
Well, very clearly, it's just a very good question. Thank you very much. This will be taken into consideration as overriding and general principle for everything that we support. This means that we will not, of course, only fund projects that are green, but we will ask every project to consider its impact, to look at what it can do better to support the fight against climate change. And similar, by the way, also for the other big policy that I mentioned earlier regarding gender equality. So these will be principles that everybody will be asked to look at. We have to be careful, however, and I'm sure you agree with me, that we don't discriminate upon. It's easier for some to be green than for others. And we have to be very clear that we keep equal opportunities, for example, also for organizations that are in areas that are a bit more remotely, etc. So all of this, but in general, I can say already now that all the programs at the Commission level have to take this into consideration today, not only Creative Europe, all of them. And that's really a big change. And I'm actually personally also very happy that we are asked to do so, because this will be a concrete contribution to helping reach our targets. And we are forced to do so. And so all of you potential applicants will also be forced to at least think about it, and think also in terms of digital. I was asked that question on other occasions. How do you cater in for digital technology? Well, I mean, I think we have seen in the last months that a lot of things can just crumble if we can't meet face to face. And I would like to stress that we are fully aware that art and culture live through the personal contact, people meeting, experiencing a work of art, being together in a cinema, witnessing a performance on stage, or seeing, feeling the aura of a piece of art in a museum. However, we have to be prepared that such a crisis can come back, that we are not out of the crisis. So the digital means will always have to be catered in one way or another. We will ask projects to think of, what would you do in the term of a similar disruption, because now we have the time to prepare that. Unfortunately, if I may say, unfortunately, we are forced to do that. So I think it's good that we ask everyone to look ahead, and cater for these possible scenarios already in the development of their projects.
Brilliant. Barbara Gessler, thank you so much for that really inspiring and enlightening talk, packed full of information, may I say. Kate Deans has also been posting links in the chats to complement what you've been saying, and we're really looking forward to hearing more from you in the panel discussion later as well. So thank you so much for that for now.
Thank you for listening.
Absolutely.